It's episode 222. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Myst-ery videos recovered.
Red 5 standing by.
Public displays of affection. All
this and more coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday, the 7th of June, 2025.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, everyone. My name's Dave. We're going to do this introduction thing. We're going to remember to do it. My name is Dave. Welcome to This Week in Retro. Hello, twirlers. Happy Saturday, or whatever day you're listening to. Join with me today is Chris.
Are you seriously, Dave? I thought it was the other one that was Dave. I'm so confused. Yes, I'm Chris. So, hello, everyone. Who's that?
Are you Chris this week?
I'm Chris this week. I'll be Chris. Yeah. Who else?
Jason, who are you this week?
I'm still Jason. And Dave, thank you so much for mentioning the date at the top of the show. We are really lining these up and knocking them down.
Yeah, we're going to get professional. We're absolutely not going to get professional.
We're going to remember the name of the sponsor next.
Have you had a good week? Chris, I know you've been doing something this week. What have you been doing?
Oh, yeah. Look, I've got a few things to mention, so I'll rattle through them. I'll be as quick as possible. But we had the Poor Gaming Day, which I forgot to advertise in good time. But that was fantastic. Had some really good fun.
Amiga user group.
Yeah, Perth Amiga user group. Just a gaming day, not an actual normal meet with, because we do a bigger meet. This was just come along, set up your gear and play games for, pretty much an entire day. Great fun, and it grew from the last time we tried that, which is a good sign. And I'll put in the show notes a link, rather than me rabbiting on about it, link to the video. And it's just, I've decided to do the video for that. I say unedited. I've chopped it so it's a good length, but no fancy editing, no fancy music. It's just raw, so you can just feel like you were there. The other thing I want to mention is I've got unfinished business with a text adventure, which is Sphinx Adventure, which I believe is one of Jason's favorite text adventures. Is that right, Jason?
Not high on the list of Retro Adventurers classics.
He was saying wonderful things before we started recording about that, but I have unfinished business with that on the Acorn Electrons. So because my boys are into adventure gaming, Luke, who still lives with us, he's going to help me get through it finally after all these years, and we'll do that as a live stream on the Saturday, the 28th of June, 5 p.m. till 11 p.m. Perth time, which I think is 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. London time, I think, roughly, give or take. I think I've done some bad maths there looking at those numbers. It's around that time. Figure it out. At 5 p.m. start Perth time. So yeah, that'll be good. Luke's into doing Dungeon Masters for D&D and stuff like that. So yeah, should be good. He should be better at it than I ever was. And lastly, can we get this recording done, Dave? Because I'm missing Lego Masters. Do you remember when we had Owen on, Dave?
Yeah, we did.
So Owen, from the Australian TV show Lego Masters. It's now season 7. So this one's called Grandmasters of the Galaxy. So it's literally just airing as we speak. And
it's not even just our solar system. It's the whole galaxy.
It's the whole galaxy, because they've done a global one. They've done Australia-wide. They've done a global one. And so they thought, we'll go out to the entire galaxy. It just so happens that all the people that knew about Lego that they found happen to be from Earth, but that's excusable. But yeah, so Owen's back on with a new teammate, Gabby, who is also awesome. She was from previous series as well, just a different teammate. So good luck, Gabby and Owen. I don't know why I'm saying good luck, because I assume they've already recorded every single episode and we're now getting to view them. But whatever, good luck, Gabby and Owen, regardless.
I don't have anything. Jason, do you
have anything? I can't top that. I absolutely cannot top Intergalactic Lego Masters. I think we should just get right into it.
Let's do it.
Fair enough. Get started. Chris, you're up first.
Oh, yes, I am.
Put the beer down. Start talking.
Put the beer down. Namtabmai shared a video on the subreddit this week entitled The Unseen History of Myst. And what I liked about it is it's not just about the game Myst, because it's also about preservation. The video is by the Video Game History Foundation on their YouTube channel. And in it, they begin by telling us how director and producer Philip Shane is working on a documentary about the making of Myst and its sequels. That's exciting enough, but I've added links in the show notes for more information on that project. But the video then delves into how, as part of the project, the Video Game History Foundation became involved in working with Phil and with Cyan, the development house of Myst, in the digitization and retention and also the public display of the historic materials. They went to Cyan headquarters and met with Rand Miller, the co-creator of Myst.
What do you mean by the historic materials?
Well, we'll get into that. So lots of, because obviously these were multimedia games, and lots of video material was produced as part of the game. So it's all about the digitalization of that. Yeah. So they went to Cyan headquarters and met Rand Miller, the co-creator of Myst, where together they uncovered some of the hidden and almost forgotten video footage from the original projects, including original and behind-the-scenes footage from Myst, Riven, and I also assume Exile, probably part of that, and also material from their multiplayer game Uru, which is an online multiplayer adventure game. Now, Myst was a multimedia point-and-click adventure held together with stunningly pre-rendered video and some still 3D environments. And this, hosting exploration and puzzles, was held together with compelling storytelling and video cutscenes played out with live actors.
Well, I was just going to say the video talks about what a heavily acclaimed full motion video game it was, and as I was watching, I'm like, it's a bit like saying you're the nicest guy in prison, but
well, it's true. At the time, in the context of the time, this was very cool. Okay, it was actually very cool. I remember. So Myst, I was actually put off with on my first play because my PC wasn't up to it because this was sort of cutting edge at the time. This kind of multimedia game had been tried before. We're all familiar with early attempts like Psycho Killer on the CDTV and things like Seventh Guest and Night Trap on pretty much everything that had a CD-ROM drive.
Seventh Guest, a bit better. Night Trap was a bit cynical.
Yeah.
Seventh Guest, the acting the acting wasn't quite up to, I don't know, the Wisconsin Shakespeare Company, for example. But
how did we get started?
The bad acting held them back, and some people think that kind of some people think that kind of acting has a charm. Doesn't for me.
It doesn't. Seventh Guest also had quite compelling puzzles holding it all together as well. But there's something about Myst that stands out as really taking the formula and actually turning it into a playable game and with an enjoyable story. We've discussed Myst before, and we've also discussed my lack of playing most point-and-click adventure games. But I've been through Riven now, and I'm currently in Exile on the PS2 with a mate of mine as well. What piqued my interest with their digitization project, though, as detailed in the video, was the unforeseen challenges of the video format they were dealing with. The crew from the Video Game History Foundation seem younger than us, I think, looking at the video. And that's why they were surprised to find that the footage they uncovered was not on VHS, but was on Betacam tapes, or Digibeta, as it's fondly known. Not to be confused with Betamax at all. And this actually gave me a chuckle because that's what I cut my teeth on back in the late 90s. More on that later. The footage they've uncovered not only includes the unedited footage of the actors for the game, actors that, of course, were mostly from the dev team, by the way, and their poor family members, including Rand Miller himself, but also his father was roped in. But they also have lots of footage that they took about the development process. So footage of them playing on pre-release N64, for example, footage of their 3D rendering processes, footage of the team and the working environment. It's a real treasure trove. We've discussed Myst before on the show, so let's talk about preservation projects like this, lost footage, if you want to call it that. One that springs to mind is the footage of early Commodore and then the final days of Commodore and what's become known as the Deathbed Vigil footage. And also the footage featured from Atari in the documentary Game Over, which seems to, leave out the parties at the offices for some reason.
Those are the parties that everybody knew about, but nobody personally attended.
Yeah,
let's make that clear.
I didn't go, but everyone else did.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, what floats your boat? When it comes to watching these kind of things, guys, and does it pique your interest looking behind the curtain on these kind of things? And are you keen for this documentary that they're working on as well?
I can't work out what I like in docos and what I don't. Sometimes I really like one, and at other times I feel as if it takes away from the magic of the game. Certainly, in fact, almost universally for films, I don't want to see any of the behind-the-scenes documentaries, how it was done, all the rest of it. I avoid even seeing actors being interviewed, partly because of how false they all are, but also because I don't want to see the actors outside of the film, because I want to know the characters, not the actors.
Have you looked at the behind-the-scenes footage for Lord of the Rings, though?
Some of it.
It's stunning. It's amazing, and that's another world in its own right in terms of the lengths that they went to make that movie. So I know what you're saying, but that for me is an exception to the rule, because I'm the same. Star Wars, I don't want to see any behind-the-scenes Star Wars, because as far as I'm concerned, Star Wars is a documentary that actually happened.
Yeah,
right.
Filmed on location in Alderaan.
Yeah, but Lord of the Rings, the way the lengths they, in terms of even taking turf from a mountain and then having to put it back as part of the preservation of the landscape after they, built a city on top of it and then taking it off. It's amazing. Anyway, yeah, carry on.
Even for special effects, the more I know how it's done, the less I enjoy it. I already struggle with CGI in films where my brain knows instantly that what they're doing isn't possible. So the suspension of disbelief is gone. Any sense of peril is gone, where they overuse CGI to do things that are over the top. So seeing how it's done, I think, would make it even worse. But there are docos that I like, and I think my favourite is Get Lamp, which is a doco in text adventures, particularly on the Infocom ones. I absolutely thoroughly love that. And I think for me to enjoy a doco, I want it to be positive, not to the point where it's dishonest. I don't want to see something that's not true, but I want to see something that puts things in a positive light. It's definitely overall positive, and that enhances the experience of doing it. So that's what works for me. What I don't want to see is a bunch of people saying, yeah, we were 20 years old, we didn't have a clue what we were doing, we kludged it all together, the lore doesn't really make sense when you look at it. I made this bit, and Alan made that bit, and we weren't speaking to each other, and we don't really know how it adds up. And then next time you go to play the game, that's how you'll feel.
That's true. Yeah. Jason?
Yeah, as far as the documentary thing goes, absolutely nobody asked, so I salute everybody's restraint on this. But when I did that Altair type-in thing, the letter from Dean to Tabitha, I was like, well, nobody writes documentaries about the first type-in program, but if they did, this letter from the front might look a little like this. So yeah, I was kind of thinking about the documentary format when we did that a couple of weeks ago. And your focus on that Betacam tape, I was reminded of a story my friend Bohush Blahut from the old Retro Thing blog told years ago about being at a video industry trade show, and his colleague was kind of embarrassing him by running around just to every nearby booth, and all he was doing was just like holding his hands out and saying, Betacam tape, because he had run out of blanks and he needed one, and he was just going from station to station. In actually watching that and hearing the guy explain it, I did have a little bit of a feel of like, finding Betacam equipment would be non-trivial. And it's like, hey, can you give us, a little bit of a reduction on the rate if we spend just a minute, talking about you guys and what you do? So the kind of making a meal out of it felt a little bit like, hey, we're gonna throw a bone to these guys that did the professional conversion for us.
As I mentioned, I cut my teeth on Digibeta. The cameras we used were Digicam, which used digital tapes that gave a nice clear signal and could also store a digital timecode that could be switched on and off in playback. Playback into the edit suite could be done either via the camera itself or using a Digibeta deck, which is generally what we did, which for us was plugged into the PC via Firewire. So you weren't just streaming the audio and video signal, it was actually a digital information stream, creating a file. And Premiere, even back then, so this is the late 90s that I was getting into it, Premiere, which was our editor of choice, could control the camera or the deck to actually scrub through the tape. So you could even, on your PC, be scrubbing through the tape before you've imported a single thing. And so you didn't have to bring the whole tape in. You could just bring in the clips that were actually worth using. But in fact, we used to do batch capture. So you could use an Excel spreadsheet to set your in and out points for each clip, set them out in an Excel spreadsheet, and then basically using the batch capture command in Premiere, you just sit back and watch your PC, control the tape deck or the camera if you plugged it directly into the camera to import just the bits off the tape that you actually required to do your edit. It was actually really cool.
I like watching anything digital controlling mechanical stuff.
I love it.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It's to me doing that. I mean, I was doing that at work. Sorry, go on, Jason.
No, you finish.
No, you go.
Okay. Just if you like seeing old workflow, 90s workflows, as they're showing screenshots and captures, there's, was it pronounced soft image or soft image? I don't know if I was ever, but whatever, they're 3D modeler. So you're seeing soft image 3D and all the kind of very 90s, high-end 90s ways of doing things you get in that documentary.
Yeah, it's so true. And yeah, in response to you, Dave, so I mean, for me, seeing the PC control the tape deck or the camera was the same as seeing a BBC Micro control a Lego robot arm, right?
Yeah,
it's the same feeling.
Even just when I got my Iowa, if that's how it's pronounced, Walkman, and having electronic buttons rather than mechanical buttons to stop and record, it felt so futuristic.
Yeah.
So having having my Amstrad control the cassette player, things like that. I love mechanical things controlled by digital stuff.
It's so cool. So cool. The format, so this tape format, kind of made its way into the home market. Not the same format, but in the form of mini DVs. And for those listening, I'm holding onto the camera. There were tiny cameras. And if you had a home video camera in the 90s and early 2000s, you were probably used to this tape format. So this is mini DV, is what I'm holding up there. Very small little tapes, but they were a digital format. So that wasn't the same. It's not a mini VHS at all. It's a mini digital tape, and it could do exactly the same as I said before. It's got a time code you could switch on and off in post. And your PC, if you plugged it in, so here's one of my original video cameras, has that's the wrong side. It has a FireWire port, and you'd plug into the FireWire, and again, you could control your PC. Sorry, you could control your camera directly from your PC and do batch capture and all that kind of stuff at home as well on a budget, which is what I did because I was a nerd. But I'm sure heaps of people that had these cameras back then either weren't aware of that or didn't care. But yeah, so in fact, some of the footage that they found from the Video Game History Foundation has found was also in mini DV format, because that became a more affordable format over Digicam as well. But other than that video editing nostalgia trip, I'm very glad that the Video Game History Foundation have not only been able to digitize this footage, but have also made it publicly available on their website. And I'll put a link to the show notes so you can have a look at that as well. So that's even before the documentary comes out, you can have a look at that footage. And now I'm eagerly awaiting the documentary by Philip Shane, and we'll follow the progress with great interest. While I wait, I think I need to actually get on with digitizing all the tapes that I've got here next to me. I still haven't got around to doing that. I haven't bothered to capture any of them. And it's footage among that stuff. There's footage of my twins while they were babies. So it's kind of important to preserve, because it's possible that my original PS2 was in the background of that footage of my twin boys.
We are sponsored this week by PCBWay.com. Thank you very much, PCBWay. PCBWay make PCBs, as you might imagine, but also they will do things like pick and place for your little boards. They'll put on the tiny little common parts that are super difficult to solder on, meaning you can design boards with this little small part on rather than great big through-hole things. They'll also do CNC milling. They'll do 3D printing. But I think what we like most about PCBWay is the shared project library, where you can find things to inspire you. You can find solutions to little problems that are cheap. And I think, Jason, you've been looking at that, haven't you?
Yep. The shared projects allow you to download, improve, or just order something that's been submitted by members of the community. And the featured project right now is a Logic Analyzer version 6.0, an affordable logic analyzer capable of reaching up to 400 megahertz of sampling speed using a Pico or Pico 2 as its core, offers 24 channels, can be chained up to 5 devices, allowing the sampling of up to 120 channels at once. So if you're doing your own hardware hacking, having a Logic Analyzer on hand is really handy. And you can find that was submitted by El Dr. Guzman of Spain to PCBWay as their shared project of the week.
Yeah, so that uses a Pico, yet another project leveraging the really super cheap Raspberry Pi Pico. I love all these projects. Pico CPC, for example, Pegasus, all the rest of it. I love these little projects, taking these cheap boards and turning them into something really useful. So thank you very much, PCBWay, for sponsoring us this week. Something we often talk about in Retro is the idea that a game has aged well, or conversely, of course, the idea that a game has not aged well. Now, that can mean something like Leisure Suit Larry, where there's a feeling that, yeah, I'm not as comfortable with that now. And that game did come up into our Discord this week. Link in the show notes to our Discord. The feeling that the misogynistic stuff belongs in the past. Now, I'm not sure if it was because of one of my rants, if we got onto the subject of Leisure Suit Larry, because of one of my rants about the horrendously sexist Games Master, which really was terrible, inexcusably so. And that hasn't aged well. But on the subject of Larry, I will say in its defence that the butt of the jokes was either Larry or the player and Larry. It wasn't as bad as what I think people think it is. Having said that, I'm not that much of a fan of the game. Have you played it recently, Chris? You ever played Leisure Suit Larry?
I've never played it, but the reason why I'm giggling, I swear it was one of the Leisure Suit Larry stands at the ECTS, I think the second year I went. They had bikini babes on the stand to promote the game. And and nobody was going to the stand, not because they found it offensive, but because it's a nerd fest. And as we all, I think, would put our hands up to, nerds don't know how to talk to women. And so nobody was going to the stand. It was the worst promotion ever because nobody had the guts to go up and talk to them. Carry on.
What I actually mean, though, that's a bit of a tangent. What I actually mean by a game aging well isn't in terms of modern sensibilities. It's the idea that you actually want to pick it up and play it in 2025 without that nostalgic attachment to it, or even without the idea of exploring gaming history. Now, you're going to play Sphinx with your son, and he's going to be playing it just out of historical curiosity. And imagine that you wouldn't be playing this game just because if it came out in 2025 as a new game, you wouldn't go near it. So you need that attachment for it. And I would say that this might be a bit critical of it, but it hasn't aged. It isn't as good to play as it was when it was on release.
It wasn't good to play on release.
No, afraid not.
What did we have, though?
Yeah.
So just enjoying a game now simply for its merits. So not because you loved it as a kid, not because it was the first game you got for your PC after saving up the money from your first job, not because you and this game have such memories together, or not because you feel it's unfinished business, which you mentioned, and I know I go back to games for because I feel as if there's unfinished business and I will not be defeated. Simply because it's a good game that stands on its own and you aren't left thinking that it's being held back by the technology it was written for. This was the best they could do at the time, for example. Now, here's an Ultima reference. Lots of Ultima has not aged well. It was always pushing the technology at the time, and it was simply magical at the time to play. There was nothing as good as Ultima. But I could not honestly say you get more fun in 40 hours of Ultima 3 compared to 40 hours of a modern RPG. I don't believe you would without some reason for that to be the case through nostalgia, historical connection, or something like that. A game, though, on the other hand, that has aged really well. In fact, one I've been playing this week in the little spare time that I've had is Terror from the Deep. Now, Terror from the Deep is the sequel to a better-known game, UFO Enemy Unknown, which in some jurisdictions was known as XCOM UFO Defense. It is a turn-based strategy game with a global strategy element, base building, manufacturing, buying things, equipping craft, but the main focus is the tactical combat element. It's been remade several times, officially and unofficially, and the more recent leans far more into the RPG side of things. It's still fundamentally the same, feels the same, but it leans far more into the RPG side of things than the original, and I think the original stands up all the better for that. But it's not the original I've been playing. It's been something called Open XCOM. Now, I've known about Open XCOM for years, but I've not tried it until this week, and it is fantastic. It improves things in terms of compatibility. It fixes some old bugs. It makes the UI and user experience just better. But it's fundamentally the same game. It looks like the same game. It feels like the same game. And once I'm 5 minutes into playing it, that's the game I'm playing. I'm playing Terror from the Deep. I'm not playing an Open XCOM recreation of it. in my head. It's really true to the original. And of course, this is a replacement engine that requires the original game assets to run. So effectively, it's a mod for it. It's not a new game. You have to buy the original game to run it. Now, I don't especially care that people are making money from selling a game they made in the 90s. I'm ambivalent about that, I think. Or more accurately, I expect these people aren't making any money, but the publishers that originally did it have the rights and they're making money. My view is that it should have long ago reverted to public domain, but it hasn't, and that's how things are. But what I do care about is takedowns and projects being killed off. Projects which create a new engine to use the existing assets are wonderful in my view because they can't be taken down so easily. Not only are they not duplicating what you need to do the game, because you need to buy it, but the actual rights owners, you would think, would be happy that they exist, because all of a sudden, people are starting to buy this old game that nobody was buying from GOG or from Steam because this project has put a new lease of life into it and these rights owners suddenly can make some more money from it. And the one that sticks out to me most is Exalt. It's the first engine type thing that I played like that, which is for Ultima 7, because Ultima 7 was written with absolutely no regard that 386s might not be the last word in PCs. So a fast 486 or more wrecked the game. So, guys, do any of your favourite games have a new modern engine that uses the assets?
I mean, the cheap answer from the text adventure guy is Frotz and all of the other Z machine interpreters that use the old Infocom assets. As we were talking, I remembered it's less needed these days because of the remasters of Baldur's Gate, but there had been a very popular mod that would take the original Baldur's Gate's assets and drop them into the Baldur's Gate 2 engine, which gave you more character classes, better spells and options, mostly better animation and graphics and screen resolution and stuff like that. So it's a trend that's been going on for a long time. There's all those Doom engines and things like that as well that take those old assets and make it a lot easier to play on modern hardware as well.
I think the text adventure ones are vital. I think they are absolutely magnificent that they can do what they can do. Not only do they take the files that Infocom used with the games, and Infocom were able to port all these games to different systems by writing one game and an interpreter for each system to use it. But these modern things are just what Infocom was already doing, but they allow people to write games. They allow people to make new text adventures, and that's what happened in the 90s when text adventures became commercially pointless. But there was a boom in text adventures because people started writing their own just for fun. So yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I was aware of some for X-Wing that I was following, but I never got around to trying any of them. And there was some for Elite Frontier First Encounters, which I did try very briefly, which just basically added sort of more detailed models and much more detailed textures. But even now, I mean, that was a long time ago, and I'd got on that bandwagon very late in the piece as well. So when I tried them, those mods were probably retro in themselves. So it's not modern 2025 modern, but it's the same kind of deal.
None for FPS. You're a big FPS player. No source ports or anything like that?
No, to be honest. I mean, if you include stuff like, the PS4 version of Doom and Doom 2, where they've just rehashed it out for the modern systems and their updated textures, that's as close as I would get with any FPSs. But it still feels very close to the original. Those ones still feel close to the original, whereas what we're talking about here kind of transforms the whole experience whilst maintaining the original campaigns and storyline, yeah.
So there are a few of these about, and it's finally time to get to the actual submission today, which is from Vanessa, and it's about easily one of my favourite game series, possibly my favourite game, depending on when you ask me. If you'd asked me sometime in the past 3 years when I was playing it, I would say, oh yeah, definitely the best game ever made. And I'll say it with unwavering confidence, gameplay that has absolutely aged well and is now just as good as it was in the 90s in terms of the gameplay. I know that, Chris, you're a fan of this, and I think we'll get to find out, because you've never asked you about this series before. We'll find out soon if Jason is a fan. It's XWVM, X-Wing Virtual Machine. It is a new engine. You might call it a mod. They themselves call it a tool to play the original product. And that original product is, of course, Star Wars X-Wing. Wonderful game. The project has been 10 years in the making, and they announced on the 25th of May that they have finally reached the alpha stage. They say XWVM has reached a critical point where the support for the first game in the series, X-Wing, has achieved virtually complete playability, and the few missing features suffer from diminishing returns or aren't as important to justify delaying it any further. So yesterday, as we record this, they released the alpha for it after so much work. And in other words, unlike so many other fan projects, this one got finished. Not quite complete. There's some textures that haven't been upgraded in the HD pack, for example, but it is at the point where it's playable. It uses the Unity engine to recreate the game engine, but uses all of the original assets with some replaced where they don't look quite so sharp, and that's optional. So higher resolutions, it has better aspect ratios, it has better video quality, it has support for a plethora of input devices, including VR. A critical thing about the original game was LucasArts' iMuse, which is a music system using MIDI that dynamically responded to the gameplay. It made the gameplay much deeper and more immersive because the music would seamlessly transition to a rebel fanfare when your fleet arrived, or a sad tune when your wingman was blown up, or a sinister Imperial march when the enemy flagship hyperspaced in. And in order to go CD quality on the music, later re-releases, particularly the Windows version, dropped iMuse, which you asked me is a crime. And now XWVM has remastered music, but it's digital iMuse, so you get the best experience. It's the little things that help. In this version, the cockpit will move very slightly rather than just a static image. There'll be reflections, etc. And it makes it look amazing. In a 2025 where modern gaming has so many problems, we now have a modern engine for one of the best games ever made. And this means that you can have wonderful gameplay experience with 90s attitudes towards DLC and in-game purchases. In other words, none but 2025 attitudes towards game quality. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, to answer the question from before, I am a big X-Wing and TIE Fighter fan. I admit I haven't played it for years, but A++ in my book. And I'm still chasing after the high of the particular combination of music and sound from whatever version it was I played. It wasn't the CD version. There's something in the mission briefing. It was the combination of the sound effects. And I don't even know if it was particular to like whatever model of Sound Blaster I had, but every recreation I've seen or video, I was like, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. So I'm hoping that this version will finally give me what I've been looking for the past 30 years.
There'll be options in it. There are options in it, so you can play around until you find what you're looking for. What do you think, Chris?
I know what it would be that Jason's chasing, because X-Wing was really hard to get running with sound because of the need for external memory and the memory to be managed correctly. So it was probably silent, Jason. But yeah, I've been watching these sort of modern mods for X-Wing with interest, like I said, but it was a while back and I hadn't kept up with it. And especially because of the VR, because I love VR. But then I'll be honest here, Squadrons came out, which, yes, is modern Star Wars. And it also offers VR, and it's stunning. And there's lots I don't like about it, like some of the mechanics in the game. There's too much story and throwing you out of 3D for a cinematic cutscene. I really hate that. But God, it's good. It's very good. And even on the PSVR 1, which is the one I've got, it's just absolutely stunning. When I first played it, I actually thought back to these projects, and I thought, I hope they've not wasted their time. Because, don't forget, Squadrons is a whole new game, but it's not the same as the original. So while I think what I'm trying to say is there's still merit in revisiting the original X-Wing with new models and with VR tacked on. But yeah, Squadrons is a very good game if you haven't played it.
For me, the appeal of X-Wing and TIE Fighter, of course, is the immersion in the Star Wars sounds and music and sights and all the rest of it, but also the gameplay. The gameplay is absolutely phenomenal. You are part of a fleet. Now, you'll start off, you'll be on your own, you'll have your missions to achieve, and then quite often the flagship arrives and blows all the rest of them away, and you're fine. And it only depends on what you do. But as it goes on, you will become part of a fleet doing things. You'll have wingmen. There'll be Y wings doing some stuff while you're in your A wings doing other stuff. There'll be X wings doing other stuff, and there'll be fleets battling each other. And they'll be doing things, and you'll have your objectives. You'll have secondary objectives, and in TIE Fighter, you get secret objectives. And everyone else in there has an objective, what they're trying to achieve. And it turns out that in these missions that you not only need to do your objective, but you need to make sure the Empire doesn't achieve theirs, and your wingmen and your other pilots achieve theirs. So there's a lot of things to do going on in this. It's quite complex and so on. It's so immersive. So it's time for a new generation of rebel pilots to get in their X-Wings and take on the Empire. Link in the show notes. Housekeeping. Jason is now fully officially on board because Stu Cambridge of Sensei Software fame has done his pixel portrait, which was done, I think, just in time for last week's show. So it was in the graphics and so on. So there's nothing more official than getting your pixel portrait. And you got it now, Jason. If you want one yourself, if listeners and viewers, if you want one from Design Droid, which is Stu's company, or any of his other stuff, then there's a link in his show notes. We love this stuff from Stu. Thank you very much, Stu. Designdroid.co.uk. Stu, I should mention, has also got a Kickstarter on the go with Tony Warrener. You'll know Tony from Revolution Software, so that's Lure the Temptress, Beneath a Steel Sky, and then the Broken Sword series. And what they've done is a new Spectrum Next game. It's very in the style of Gauntlet. They don't mention Gauntlet in the blurb, but it's very in the style of Gauntlet, but a bit more involved. And I think it's much more possible than Gauntlet. You don't have to keep putting coins in. Top-down exploration, collecting, shooting things, and it's called Urbex Warriors: The Lost City. And although it's been made for the Spectrum Next, there is also a PC version. Obviously, the Spectrum Next isn't a huge market, so that's why they've done the PC version as well. It is 15 quid for the digital version for either the Next or for the PC Mac Linux version. Physical versions are available for more. You can either get a DVD box one or you can get a bigger box one. As we record, it's only 4 days in and it's 350% to target. So it's absolutely stormed through what their target was for it. So looks like they're on to a winner. Maybe if they're going so much above target, this justifies them spending time making an even better game. The game is finished, though, to the point of being playable. So this isn't just, we will make a game, we promise. This is, we've made a game, and we just need to polish and decide what else goes into it. So you can actually see the gameplay on the Kickstarter. We're not sponsored by them, and I hope it doesn't come across as shilling. We're just here to tell you about new, exciting stuff. But back on to Stu and his pixel portrait of Jason. We'd like listeners and viewers, we think we're finished. We think we've done all the updates on the blurb and the graphics everywhere that you see us. But we'd like our listeners and viewers to let us know if you can find any things that need updating. If they don't mention Jason, please let us know so that we can fix them.
And coming up on Patreon later this month to celebrate Duncan having his holiday, we're going to do a Q&A later in the month. So we're collecting questions on the Patreon post now. If you sign in there, you can sign in and ask a question just at the free tier. You can only hear our answers, however, if you join. So that's our way of thanking you for your support. There's still time to send questions. I'm already looking at there's more than a dozen there as of this recording, and I'm really hoping for more. And we'll probably record that for release either late June, probably early July. And that brings us to our newest patron, Ian. Thank you so much, Ian, for becoming a twirler.
We'll record it on the 28th of June, so you definitely won't get the Q&A until maybe mid-July. But thank you very much for Ian for signing up to become an official twirler. If you'd like to join Ian and all the rest of them, then go to patreon.com/ it's not backslash, I've been told, / or just / This Week in Retro. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you.
Loving an Elevator. Remember that song?
I do.
I do.
Good song.
Well, it's not quite that one. what we have is twirling a refrigerator. Twirling a refrigerator. Thank you, Dr.
serious?
Local. Dr. Local watched last week's episode, on his refrigerator, which has an amazingly good display. I'm surprised to see. I don't know how the sounds like in a refrigerator. They're not renowned for their audiophile sound, I'm sure. But there you go. Picture of Twir running on a refrigerator. Amazing.
Valkyran Xbox lets us know that the passing of Genesis Fan 64, a Mexican homebrew coder who has worked across pretty much all of Sega's consoles. So very sad to see that news.
Squelch411 links us to an XDA story on RetroArch's new run-ahead feature, which they say makes Super Mario World into a modern platformer. And what they mean by that is that the emulation can get rid of input lag.
Yeah, so it kind of works out what you might do and simulates all that and then kind of reads ahead kind of thing. It's, clever idea. You can also use it to cheat, but what it can do is get rid of lag so that you've got a wireless controller, for example. You can use that. Weeks ago, I told you that Barcadia in Norwich had closed down and likely would not reopen, and it has now been confirmed on Nostalgia Nerd's Kickstarter page for the project that it is not going to reopen. It's sadly closed down. And Free Play Gaming Arcade in Portland has also closed. Couldn't afford to remain open either. So thank you for Suborbital Zen and Magical Mike for letting us know about those two things.
And from fridges to truck trailers, someone in Wisconsin has put graffiti on a trailer, the three letters BBS. Jason himself spotted this. And Jason, have you got a bit of paint on your fingers there?
Always washed it off.
He's clean, yeah.
Perhaps a useful follow-up to Dave's story there about games aging well. Squelch411 links us to a DualShockers article with 10 games they say will never need a remake.
And yeah, this got my hackles up. There are actually 10 great games there, but I strongly disagree with what the article says. I'll take a quote from it. It says, to put it in other words, some titles don't have to improve their graphics, mechanics, or engines. And if you don't believe me, I'm sure these 10 classic games that will never need a remake will make you think otherwise. So, source ports are fantastic. And where possible, games should get one to adapt to modern resolutions, aspect ratios, controllers, etc. Now, it's obvious from the author that, from the game's pick, that this is a millennial author who had grown up on consoles. But things like Deus Ex, for example, benefit from changes that are made to them. You can make Deus Ex use, I think it's DX11 or something, and it looks better without any modifications other than that. There are lots of reasons, like we've said about X-Wing, to take these games where the gameplay and the mechanics are fantastic. There is lots of reason to make them playable on modern machines. It's less necessary for console games because you can play an NES game, no bother at all, in Myst-ery and so on. It looks great. But when it comes to PC games and later games, there's good call to do little adjustments to make them work well. So I think he would have made a point better if he just stuck to saying the gameplay and mechanics are perfect, but maybe they could use modern enhancements to make them better, and then he would have been right. There is loads and loads more in the subreddit. Thank you very much for submitting all those articles to us. I would suggest that if you want more than just to listen to us, although if you don't want more to listen to us, just listen to us, it's fine. But if you want more, go to the subreddit, have a look through, have a browse through all the articles submitted. We only cover a fraction of them every week. There's lots and lots of things submitted to us. Have a look there. You'll find articles to read. You'll find videos to read. And of course, because it's Reddit and they're upvoted and downvoted by our viewers, the more interesting ones tend to go to the top. So that URL is, Chris?
reddit.com/r/this week in retro. Definitely / not /.
Correct. www, the World Wide Web.
How much base RAM do you need to free up, though?
Requires at least 576 kilobytes of conventional memory.
It's never going to happen.
You can
584 if you want Sound Blaster support.
I'm going to need another boot up disk.
Is it possible to die of embarrassment? Well, not directly, I don't think. But what about to create a category-defining product where both the product and the category name are such ripe targets for innuendo that everybody just gives up on the whole thing. That, I submit, did not at all help the Palm Pilot nor the Personal Digital Assistant, or PDA, to thrive. This story was submitted by Squelch411. It's a 45-minute video from Retrobytes documenting the history of that category-defining PDA. It's very aptly titled, How the Palm Pilot Changed Personal Tech Forever, Then Disappeared. Now, personal digital assistants didn't begin with the Pilot, and in fact, the video kicks off by explaining its origins as a software developer for earlier devices. If you completely missed the Palm Pilot, I'll try to sum it up as quickly as possible. They were small rectangular devices with compact LCD screens, usually made out of plastic, except when they weren't, navigated with a stylus, except when they had keyboards. Because they launched in 1996 and rechargeable battery technology was nowhere near what it is today, the earliest models were powered by standard AAA batteries. That meant you were living on the knife's edge of those batteries because there was no independent battery backup. Your data was not in flash RAM. It was just RAM. So if you ran out of juice, it was all gone. The system was fairly good at holding a charge in between battery changes, especially if you took the batteries out one at a time, although backing up your data before changing the batteries was certainly recommended. This was different than the higher-end experiences you got from things like the Scion 3 series, which to me is still the pinnacle of portable computing, where you got a little coin battery backup to keep everything fresh in RAM, even if the AA system batteries wore down. Before I get too stuck into the Pilot world here, Chris, Dave, did you guys have handheld computing platforms of choice before the smartphone kind of changed everything? Anything from that 90s, 2000s PDA boom that you feel the world is worse off without?
Absolutely nothing at all. Handheld computing is an anathema to me in general. I love sitting down with a proper computer, a full-size keyboard, no chiclet laptop keys, no little stylus, nothing like that. But there are two devices that do stand out for me. And they probably don't qualify for what you're asking, but I'll put them in so I'll get something to say. The first is the Cowon iAudio X5, which I got in 2005. It's an MP3 player, or some people were calling them iPods, even though they weren't an iPod. It has a lovely color screen, and it replaced my Creative Jukebox. I absolutely loved it. I bought it at the same time as a Norive case for it. They make this, they're from Saint-Tropez, they make lovely leather cases. And when I eventually sold it on, it was still in mint condition, despite using it every day. It was fantastic. I used it every day. I absolutely loved it. And because it wasn't Apple, I loved it all the more. The other one is what people call a Kindle. And I wanted one before they existed. I wanted something that wasn't a backlit LCD screen or LED screen. I wanted something that was more like paper. And then they were finally invented. My first one was a Bookin SciBook. They're a French company. And I had three of them because the screen is super fragile and it would break. It was just a thin sheet of glass. It would break. But the idea of having my entire book library in my hand was amazing. The idea of having it all there was absolutely amazing. I actually like curating it as well. So while I wasn't really into any Palm Pilots, etc., I can kind of see the appeal of having a really nice device that you have all customized just the way you want. And when our friend Clint talks about these types of things in LGR, I grab just a little bit of his joy and appreciation for them, even though they're not my kind of thing.
For me, I'm going to include it. It might be a bit of a cheat, but the Amstrad Notepad from 1992 had one of them. My brother bought it and I stole it. It was more the size of an iPad, but that thing was amazing, I think, for the time in terms of what it did. And it had a proper keyboard as part of it as well. And also, I did have a Palm, but it was a later one. So it was early 2000s. It was a color one. I bought it secondhand, but I had the GPS. I think I've talked about this before. I had the GPS add-on slotted in the back, and it had a pirate copy of TomTom on it. And it just felt like something straight out of James Bond at the time.
Yeah, we could still live in the future back then. Anyway, the Retrobytes video goes on to explain how essential the desktop sync software was to life as a Palm Pilot user, because it wasn't for several years after their release that things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth were standard features. There were no storage slots in the earliest models, no ability like we have today to connect to your computer and just have it be seen as a regular external drive or to sync up to any number of cloud services. So everything depended on the special dock or cable connecting to your desktop or laptop computer. When that worked correctly, you could sync up your contacts, calendar entries, notes, no trouble, just like we're all doing today in the modern smartphone ecosystem. When it didn't work, you really had little recourse but to fight with that sync software. The cable was almost your only option to get data on or off. Most models had an infrared port, which today is very old-fashioned, but again, before Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, infrared was the de facto wireless communications method. This was somewhat unreliable, of course, because you need uninterrupted line of sight, but it did work. And for a brief time in the business world, it was understood and expected that if you were an early adopter, you could walk around a conference floor or trade show with your device out and quickly exchange contacts with a quick IR beam like you would do with a business card. So the video gets into the Palm's original Motorola 68000 based CPU architecture in the form of the Dragon Ball processor. And Retrobytes explains that although it was an older architecture, there were plenty of good reasons to use it, not least of which were its low cost and what for the era was low power consumption. And overall, this really speaks to one of the Palm Pilot's early greatest advantages. They were using parts that weren't cutting edge, but they were good enough. And by doing that, they were able to hit the market with products that had the appeal of, I can afford to take a chance on this. It might be good enough. Now, the 160 by 160 pixel display did eventually get boosted a little bit. There were some extra grayscales that came along for the ride. Like, people like Chris did eventually get color. Those very first models were not even backlit. When they did add backlight, it was not the crisp, shiny displays of today that you can read in any lighting condition from, utter darkness to, bright sunlight. But it was that eerie blue-green electroluminescent light called Indiglow, which was the battery-conscious way to light up a display through the 1990s. And then I think kind of became the case hacker craze with that electroluminescent wire for a while in the 2000s. So the video does a good job summarizing the various name and ownership changes that affected the Palm Pilot ecosystem. At first, the devices were just the Pilot. Then the pen people got irritated, so the owner at the time, US Robotics, decided to go with Palm Pilot, despite what must have been snickering in the marketing department. Then they realized that sounded silly and rebranded as Palm, but it was too late. We're all just going to call it the Palm Pilot now and forever. The retrospective does talk about the rival organization Handspring and their expansion slot system. Oh, you say, you just can't escape it. But I don't think the video does quite enough to discuss Handspring's extremely reasonable decision to put keyboards on those things. Retrobytes talks about programming for the Pilot and is clearly a fan, but I'm sorry. It is impossible to take the original Pilot's graffiti input seriously. The original Pilots were driven by the stylus, and you were meant to do your alphanumeric input using this goofball single-stroke alphabet that I always found brain-breaking. Yes, we know that the Newton's handwriting recognition didn't work either. It was the 90s. They had to do something. Like any computer workaround skill, graffiti could be learned, but what was your reward? You got to be great at a dead-end tech platform. Writing in the graffiti format is a dead skill now, one you can't find a good use for even if you try, much like being great at entering computer programs directly into memory via front panel switches instead of a keyboard. Guys, do you have a graffiti-like skill that you excel at that there is absolutely no call for in modern computing?
I could have said fixing MP3 tags. I'm fast at it. I have neat little tricks of knowing when the right time to turn file names into tags and to read tags into file names and to quickly chop and change things to get them all neat and uniform. And then, of course, we got these online databases that once you recognize what the CD was, it correctly tagged everything up. So that skill became useless, except it isn't, because in the last couple of months, I've been sorting out my audiobook library and using Audio Bookshelf for that. And all of a sudden, these skills are back in demand because there isn't an online database for audiobooks to do that thing properly. So I'm suddenly correcting it. But the other one I thought of is ZMUD programming. So ZMUD is Zuggy's MUD client. MUD's used to use a terminal client, but people then realized, hang on, we can do an enhanced terminal client. And ZMUD was the premier one. It was nicer to use. It remembered sites. It added color. But more importantly, you could have it parse the output from the MUD. So that meant when I was in a battle with 30 other players in the same room and literally screens of information every second, I could have it highlight stuff. I could have it change the background color so certain things stood out. If I was knocked down, for example, I needed to know. I could have it create a status bar so that it would tell me in a particular part of the screen how many hit points I had, how many magic points I had, for example. And it got really complex. One thing you couldn't do though in MUDs was have, or at least you shouldn't do in MUDs, was have ZMUD enter commands back to the MUD. That was the line you must not cross, because that was cheating. So people would talk about using triggers or using macros, and that would mean that if someone disarmed you, for example, you would program ZMUD to send a command to get weapon back up, to pick up the weapon. Cheating. So I didn't do that. But anything else was fair game. Things like auto mapping. As you wander around, it took that text input. Imagine taking the text output from a text adventure, Jason, and turning that into there. In the 90s, that was amazing. He did that. It's still around, but the last release of ZMUD was 2008. So I guess either MUDs are in such a decline, or people use something else now, or maybe MUDs themselves had that built in. I don't know, but that's a skill I will never use again.
And Chris, master of the mini DV tapes, how about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's linked. I think I've got three in mind. The first one, knowing how to actually tune in an RF signal seems to be a dying art. Some people assume that channel 3 is how you get the signal from your Atari 2600. Well, only if your dad hasn't messed about with the TV set first. So knowing how to manually do that is a lost skill, I think. Batch capture from mini DV, I'll throw that in there, or Betacam using Excel, completely useless. I don't think I'll ever do that again. Writing .bat files on your PC, and including ones with actual menus and stuff,
yeah, that's fancy.
That is fancy, isn't it? Yeah.
I just used multiple boot disks. I had a boot disk that would do extended, and a boot disk that would do expanded, one that would do CD-ROM, one that wouldn't do CD-ROM.
Yeah.
Pop it in, boot it up, it would read that for a second or two, then you'd be back at the hard drive and it would work. But no, I know that Phil's computer lab has killed that art off forever by creating them already. He's got these menu-based boot menus that mean you don't need to program it yourself. He's done it for you.
So
he's done them. They're so good that you don't need them anymore.
I don't need it. Well, I think you could actually argue that all those three skills that I've listed could be of use in the retro scene. So I'm going to go with this. The ability to use Flash and write action script. So thanks, Apple, because I still blame you guys for killing it.
Did a bit of Apple bashing today, aren't we?
No, it was the first one.
No, I was bashing the iPod.
Oh, fair enough.
I liked.
That's true.
I liked that I didn't have an iPod.
Speaking of coding in dying languages and dying platforms and so forth, Retrobytes talks a good deal about developing software for the Palm OS and how, despite the serious limitations of that 68,000 CPU, you didn't usually see the kind of chaotic machine crashing escapades that could characterize your experience on other early 68K desktops. Looking at you, Guru Meditations. Now, Palm was in serious trouble before the first Android phones and the iPhone hit, and it's safe to say that those two releases marked the end of Palm's relevance for almost everybody. In the video, Retrobytes says that the decline of Palm was in large part down to the emergence of Microsoft Windows CE/Pocket PC, which he derides from an operating system perspective while acknowledging that the hardware was objectively nicer than what Palm was typically shipping. He also blames the Palm OS's lack of a credible mobile web browsing experience. The last gasps of Palm, the WebOS, and silly named but in a different way products, the Palm Pre and Palm Pixie smartphones barely get a mention, which is fitting enough because by the time they came out, there was really no room in the marketplace for them. I'm not convinced that Retrobytes really hit on the reason for Palm's decline, however, and that's in part because, honestly, mobile web was a mess for everybody until really recently. I don't think anybody could be considered winning on that in the 2000s or having any hope of doing so. To me, the story of Palm is the story of an outfit, a collection of minds that at one moment managed to harness one set of ideas and one collection of good enough hardware and software and made something pretty great, and then never really excelled at anything after that. I mean, they really peaked before Y2K even rolled around. But for that shining moment nearly 30 years ago, good enough was awfully good.
So now on to the question of the week. And last week, we asked you, which software house do you miss the most? And Duncan has an answer in. Duncan says, Psygnosis springs to mind. Sony bought them, renamed them Studio Liverpool, and shut them down in 2012. Sony did renew the logo and trademarks in 2021. These and similar events have taught me that if I ever create a successful software house, then it should remain independent. I think software houses wanted to remain independent, and where they didn't remain independent, it was probably down to no choice of their own. They all ended up getting swallowed up because they had difficulties with money. But anyway, the first answer is from Imaginary Swing 8606. There is only one software house. Hate me if you must. Hate me if you want, but I really do miss Ocean Software. Had lots of misses, but boy, did they have some hits.
Agreed.
Paul, a.k.a. Hermsky, says, Microprose comes to my mind. Absolutely love the big box artwork for their games. Remember walking into Boots, seeing a shelf full of their games with their iconic blue, sometimes red boxes. They looked amazing, fantastic marketing. I just had to collect them for my Spectrum, but boy, didn't they take up a lot of space.
Nice. Machine Layer says, sorry, Dave, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, Microprose, the seal of quality, definitely.
Yeah, I've always said that. Machine Layer, he says, Lucasfilm Games / LucasArts, they had an amazing history of innovation with the Scum engine and later some of my most memorable FPS experiences like Dark Forces. Yep, fantastic. Brilliant.
Lots of other answers. Bullfrog, Origin, Epics, Sensible.
I wanted to highlight this one from Disastrous Time 9950. And this, I'm going to set up something that maybe will pay off down the line. Disastrous Time 9950 said, I think what I miss more than any one specific software house is the Britishness, especially the humor that British developers brought to their games. This is nearly eradicated from modern game development. And goes on to say, if I have to mention one that they miss, I miss Gremlin Graphics, one of the few that made the leap from 8-bit to 16-bit and the bigger leap to the 32-bit consoles. But again, teeing this up for another time, there are people out there who tell history as though the British software industry has come to dominate everything, and then its fingerprints are everywhere. And every other week we talk about DMA design. So, but here's somebody saying, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe something has been lost here." So, I'm going to tee that up as a topic for future discussion.
I think that as time went on with gaming, as more and more people came in, all these little quirks and so on got blended out by the committees that made games. Anyway, loads of answers there. Thank you very much for submitting them.
Just very quickly, Dave, I found out what happened to Ocean because Rich Neptune says, answering the real question of the week, Jason's one, the Earth is definitely flat. If it was a sphere, all the oceans would fall out the sides. So that's what happened. Ocean fell off the globe. So there you go.
Yeah. On to the question of the week, and it is from Jason. Jason, what's your question of the week for our listeners this week?
Yeah, thinking about those graffiti skills or your batch file mastery, what is your best obsolete computer skill?
There we go. Thank you for listening. We will join you next week for another episode. But thank you for joining in. And if we're going to ask you to do something, go and leave us a review. We'd like you to leave us a review. Please do that.
Dave's waving.
I'm waving. Jason's waving.
I'm doing an obsolete wave for a podcast for the listeners.
Yeah. Obsolete. If you're listening, we're waving.
Yeah.
If you're watching, you don't need to be told that. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available for your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.